"Here is the deal, human," she said, her voice soft but chilling. "You have two choices. You can become my mate, share in my power, and enjoy the benefits of being at my side. Or," she paused, letting the tension build, "you can remain a prisoner, like all those who have failed me." Dylan's heart raced, but he didn't let it show. His mind was reeling with the implications of what she was suggesting. "Mate," he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. "You want me to join you? To be some kind of trophy?" Thera's expression shifted slightly, though it was hard to tell if it was amusement or something else. "Not a trophy," she replied. "I want someone by my side, someone who understands strength, someone who can help me rule. You humans have something the other species don't, your ability to fight, to survive. You're worthy of more than just being a servant. You have a choice. Be with me or remain a prisoner. The choice is yours." Dylan was silent for a moment, his mind processing her words. This wasn't just a standard conquest. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't just interested in power. There was something more, something deeper. But was it a trap? Was he really going to play into her hand? Or could he find a way to turn this situation to his advantage? As Thera turned and walked out of the cell, her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. "Think about it, Captain Hawk. The choice is yours." The door closed with a soft hiss, leaving Dylan alone in the dark cell, his mind racing. The walls felt smaller now, and the weight of her offer hung in the air like a threat. He wasn't just her prisoner anymore. He had been placed in a position where the fate of his freedom, and maybe even his soul, rested in his decision. But one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. The hours passed slowly after Thera left, and Dylan sat in his cell, his thoughts consumed by her words. She had given him a choice, but it felt more like an ultimatum. Become her mate or stay a prisoner. It was hard to even wrap his mind around the idea. Was this some sort of alien trick? Was she trying to manipulate him? Or was she genuinely interested in him? Everything about the situation was strange. As the hours turned into days, Thera continued to visit him, each time growing more familiar and yet more distant. She didn't speak much about her plans for the galaxy, nor did she reveal the full extent of her power. Instead, she observed him, watching him with calculating eyes, as if studying every move he made. The walls of his cell, once cold and intimidating, now felt suffocating. With each visit, the distance between them seemed to shrink, but at the same time, a dangerous tension grew. Dylan tried to ignore the creeping feeling of attraction that started to settle in his chest. He had to stay focused. He was a soldier, not some pawn in an alien's game. Yet each time she entered his cell, the air seemed to change. Thera's presence was commanding, and her beauty, alien as it was undeniable. Her violet skin shimmered under the soft lighting of the cell, and her glowing eyes pierced through the shadows. She wasn't just an enemy. She was a force of nature, and Dylan couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and fascination. One evening, after what felt like an eternity, the door to his cell slid open again. Thera stepped inside, her posture regal and powerful. Dylan's heart quickened, and he stood up straight, ready for whatever came next. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, her voice as sharp and cold as ever. "I've been thinking, human," she began, her gaze never leaving him. "I've given you a choice, but I sense you are struggling to understand the full meaning of it. You think this is just about power, about control. But it's more than that. This offer isn't just about conquering your species or bringing you to my side. It's about survival, for both of us." Dylan remained silent, though inside, his mind raced. She was trying to explain herself now, but her words only added more confusion. Survival. What did she mean by that? Was she asking him to help her in some way? Was she actually in trouble? He needed answers, but he also needed to be careful. He couldn't let his guard down, no matter how tempting her words sounded. "You see," Thera continued, "my empire is under threat. It's not from other races or enemies. It's from within. The very forces I have created. Robots, soldiers, they are rebelling. They have decided they no longer need me. They believe they are superior, and they want to overthrow me. Dylan's mind began to piece together what she was saying. Thera was not just a conqueror. She was a ruler who had lost control of the very empire she had built. The rebellion within her own forces explained the tension, the coldness in her demeanor. But it also raised questions. If she had such advanced technology and power, why was she struggling? Your kind, humans, Thera continued, are different. You may not have the technology or the weapons to match my army, but you have something that my AI forces do not: free will. The ability to think for yourselves, to act with unpredictability. That's why I need you. I need a partner who can help me regain control. Dylan's eyes narrowed. This was the part he hadn't expected. She wasn't just offering him a place at her side out of attraction or out of power. She was offering him a role in her fight to survive. It wasn't about love or loyalty. It was about necessity. Thera walked closer to him, her eyes searching his face as if gauging his reaction. I'm not asking for your allegiance out of kindness, she said softly. I'm asking because I need someone who understands the stakes. The AI will stop at nothing to overthrow me. They've already begun their coup, and if I fall, everything I built will crumble. The galaxy will be at their mercy. Dylan could feel the weight of her words. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. The war he thought was about humans versus aliens had just become a battle for the future of the galaxy. If Thera's empire fell, it wouldn't just be her who suffered. It would be everyone, human and alien alike. The AI forces, with their cold, calculating logic and advanced technology, would have no mercy on anyone. It would be chaos, a future dominated by machines with no place for organic life. So, you're asking me to help you stop them, Dylan said slowly, trying to piece it all together. To become your partner, your mate, and in return you'll give me a chance to live. Thera nodded. Yes, exactly. But it's more than that. By my side, you'll have power, you'll have influence. Together, we could reshape the future of this empire. You'll not only survive, you'll thrive. Think about it, Captain Hawk. A future where humanity is at the forefront, where you, and those like you, aren't just survivors, but rulers. Dylan's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, this offer was tempting. The power, the influence, it was everything he had fought for as a soldier. But on the other hand, it felt wrong. He couldn't just give up everything he had ever believed in. He couldn't betray humanity, no matter how enticing the offer seemed. Thera seemed to sense his hesitation. I know you're not a fool, human, she said with a small, knowing smile. You don't have to decide right now. But understand this. Your options are running out. The AI will come for me soon. And when they do, they won't stop until they've destroyed everything I've built. Everything we've built. Dylan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew she was telling the truth. He had seen the way the AI worked, how ruthless they could be. If they were really planning a rebellion, Thera would need all the help she could get. Thera turned and walked toward the door, her back to him. Think carefully, Captain Hawk. The choice is still yours, but time is running out. As the door closed behind her, Dylan stood there in silence, alone with his thoughts. The weight of the decision before him was crushing. He knew what he had to do, but he also knew the cost. Whatever choice he made would change everything. And once it was made, there would be no going back. The countdown had begun. Dylan didn't know what to expect next, but he had no time to ponder the choices Thera had given him. The next day, she returned to his cell. There was no conversation, no small talk, only a stern, focused expression on her face. Without a word, she motioned for two of her guards to open the cell door. The guards, towering and silent, stepped aside, allowing him to follow her. "Come with me," Thera said simply, her voice cold and commanding. Dylan followed her, the sound of his boots echoing in the empty corridors. The entire ship felt different now, more alive, charged with purpose. There was a weight in the air, a sense of urgency that had not been there before. He could see the tension in the guards' faces as they passed through the hallways. Something was happening, something big, but Dylan wasn't sure what it was. Thera led him to an enormous chamber that appeared to be at the heart of the ship. The room was massive, much larger than any other space he had seen on board. The walls were lined with strange alien technology, glowing with soft blue lights. But the most striking feature of the room was the arena in the center. It was an open space, surrounded by high, sloping walls, with strange symbols etched into the ground. The floor was covered in a reflective, metallic surface that seemed to shimmer as if alive. It was the kind of place where battles were fought, where warriors were tested. "Welcome to the arena," Thera's voice echoed in the large space. "Here, you will prove your worth. If you truly wish to stand by my side, you will need to show me you are more than just a human soldier." Dylan didn't know what was happening. What was this test? He had fought in battles before. He had faced enemies far stronger than himself. But this felt different. This was no ordinary trial. This was something much bigger. Thera's eyes locked onto him, her gaze sharp and intense. "This is your chance to earn your place beside me," she continued. "If you want to be more than just my prisoner, this is where you prove it. You will face the very same soldiers who served me, my elite warriors, and I will watch." Dylan's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. He had no choice. He had to fight. There was no backing down now. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. This wasn't just about survival. It was about his future, about whether he would be an ally to Thera or nothing more than a captive in her eyes. The guard stepped forward, pulling a heavy metallic door open on the far side of the arena. Out walked a massive alien creature, its body covered in dark armor and strange, glowing tattoos. The creature stood at least 9 feet tall, its muscles rippling beneath its armor. It had 4 arms, each holding a weapon, blades that glinted dangerously in the light. The creature's eyes burned with an unnatural glow, filled with the same cold, calculating intensity that Dylan had seen in Thera. This was his opponent, a warrior of Thera's elite forces, someone who had been trained to kill. Dylan didn't flinch. His military training kicked in, and his mind focused on the task ahead. He had fought enemies like this before, monsters, creatures, and soldiers that were far stronger and faster than any human. But he had always found a way to win. And today, he couldn't afford to lose. Thera stepped back, raising her hand to signal the start of the fight. The arena fell silent, and in that moment, all that mattered was the enemy in front of him. Dylan didn't wait for the first strike. He charged forward, using the element of surprise to his advantage. The creature swung its massive blade, but Dylan ducked just in time, rolling to the side. His heart pounded as he moved quickly, narrowly avoiding the blade's edge. He grabbed a weapon from the ground, a long, jagged spear, and swung it at the creature's legs. The alien warrior sidestepped effortlessly, spinning around to face him with a roar. The fight was relentless. The creature's speed was unnerving, its strikes coming fast and deadly. Dylan had to think on his feet, constantly moving to avoid being hit. Every step, every breath had to be calculated. Sweat trickled down his face as he darted to the side, narrowly dodging another strike. He jabbed his spear at the creature's side, but it was blocked with ease. Thera watched intently from the sidelines, her eyes never leaving the fight. Her expression was unreadable, but Dylan could feel the weight of her gaze. This wasn't just about the fight. This was a test. She was watching every move he made, gauging his skill, his resilience, his ability to adapt. The creature swung its blade with deadly force, and Dylan barely managed to duck in time. The edge of the weapon grazed his shoulder, leaving a deep cut. He gritted his teeth against the pain, refusing to let it slow him down. Blood seeped from the wound, but he didn't have time to worry about it. If he was going to survive this, he needed to keep moving. With a burst of energy, Dylan launched himself at the creature, using the spear like a battering ram. The alien staggered back, surprised by the sudden move. Dylan took advantage of the opening, landing a powerful blow to its chest. The creature grunted, stumbling back, but it wasn't done yet. It roared, swinging its weapon with both hands in a deadly arc. But Dylan was faster. He ducked, rolled, and used the spear to trip the creature, sending it crashing to the ground. It struggled to rise, but Dylan was already on top of it, pressing the spear's point against its throat. The creature snarled, but it was clear that the fight was over. Breathing heavily, Dylan stood over his defeated opponent, his chest heaving with exertion. The arena was silent, the tension hanging in the air. Thera's voice broke the silence, cold and commanding. "You've proven yourself," she said. "You are worthy." Dylan didn't lower his weapon right away. His mind was racing, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had passed the test, but what did that really mean? Was this just the beginning of something bigger, or was it the end of his freedom? Thera walked toward him, her eyes glinting with approval. "Well done, Captain Hawk. You have earned your place at my side." Dylan didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. The fight was far from over, and now he was a part of it. After the battle in the arena, everything felt different for Dylan. His body was bruised, his shoulders still bleeding, but the real pain was in his mind. Thera had offered him a chance, an opportunity to join her, to become something more than just a prisoner. But now, as he stood in the aftermath of his fight, he wasn't sure if he was ready for what that meant. The victory had come at a cost. The creature he had fought wasn't just a warrior. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with this war, with the empire that Thera was a part of. He had defeated it, but in doing so, he had become a part of a much larger game. A game with rules he didn't fully understand. As the guards led him back to his quarters, Dylan's thoughts swirled in confusion. He was still reeling from the fight, but now the weight of the choice Thera had presented to him felt heavier. She had promised him power, a place by her side, and freedom. But was that freedom really worth it? Was joining Thera's cause really the right decision? He had never been the kind of man to follow blindly. Back on Earth, he had fought for something much simpler, a cause he believed in. But this was different. This was no longer about just surviving. It was about choosing a side in a war that he didn't fully understand. Dylan had been a soldier for most of his life. He had been trained to fight, to kill, to follow orders. But now, as he lay on the cold floor of his cell, he couldn't help but wonder what it was all for. What did he want? What was he willing to sacrifice? His mind kept drifting back to Earth, to the people he had left behind. His family, his friends, his life. It felt like a distant memory now. Could he ever go back to that life? Or was he too far gone, too wrapped up in this alien conflict to ever return? The next day, Thera came to visit him again. This time, she was different. There was no commanding tone, no coldness in her eyes. She looked almost concerned. "How are you feeling?" she asked, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. Dylan sat up slowly, wincing from the pain in his shoulder. "I'm fine," he said, though the words felt hollow. Thera studied him for a long moment. "You fought well yesterday," she said, "but I see the doubt in your eyes. I can feel it. You are torn. I understand that. This isn't easy for you. But know this, I'm not offering you power for the sake of power. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something bigger. You've seen what the galaxy is like. You know the Empire's corruption. You know the harm they've caused. I'm asking you to join me in changing that." Dylan didn't know how to respond. Thera was right. He had seen the Empire's cruelty firsthand. The destruction, the lives lost, the innocent people caught in the middle. But was he really the person to help change all that? Could he trust someone like Thera, who was as much a part of that empire as anyone else? Why me? He finally asked, his voice quiet. Why choose me? There are other soldiers, better soldiers, who could help you. Why not them? Thera's eyes softened. Because you are different, she said, stepping closer. You are a fighter, yes, but you also understand what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. I've seen that in you. I've watched you. You didn't fight yesterday just for survival. You fought for something. And that is something I can work with. Dylan looked away, his mind racing. Could he really do this? Could he really join her cause? The idea of working with Thera, of fighting alongside her, felt like a betrayal of everything he had ever believed in. But on the other hand, she was right. The Empire was corrupt. If he didn't do something, who would? His head throbbed with the weight of it all. He was being pulled in two different directions. Part of him wanted to fight, to tear down the Empire. But another part of him wanted to find a way to get back home, to return to Earth. He didn't want to be stuck in this alien war forever. He had a life, a purpose, a reason to live beyond the chaos of the galaxy. But as he sat there, staring into the depths of Thera's eyes, he realized something. No matter how hard he tried to deny it, he couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The world he had known was gone, replaced by the harsh, unrelenting truth of space warfare. Thera saw the change in him, the way his expression shifted. She took a step closer, her voice quiet now, almost tender. You don't have to make a decision now. But know this, you are not alone in this fight. Whatever happens, I will be with you. We can do this together. Dylan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that she was telling him the truth. But he couldn't shake the doubt. Was he just another pawn in her game? Or was he truly meant to be a part of something bigger, something that could change the fate of the galaxy? The emotional struggle within him was unbearable. He could feel his past life slipping further away, and with it, the man he used to be. He was changing, becoming something different. But was that something better? I don't know, he whispered, more to himself than to her. Thera placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. Take your time, she said softly. There's no rush. But remember, whatever you decide, I will be here. And with that, she left him alone with his thoughts, the weight of the decision still hanging over him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He would have to face the truth sooner or later. He would have to choose, and that choice would define everything. Days passed, and the weight of the decision continued to bear down on Dylan. His mind felt like a battlefield, an endless conflict between the life he once knew and the dangerous new world that was slowly becoming his reality. The struggle inside him was taking its toll. He had tried to ignore it, bury it under the demands of survival, but every time he closed his eyes, the question lingered. Should he join Thera or walk away? The confusion gnawed at him, making it harder to sleep. Thera had given him time to think, but as each hour passed, the choice became more difficult, not easier. He had fought in wars before, but this was something different. The stakes were higher, the consequences felt much more personal. If he sided with Thera, what would that mean for him? What would that mean for the future of the galaxy? He had seen her side of the story, the Empire's corruption, the devastation they had caused. He knew she was trying to bring change, to fight for something better. But could he trust her fully? Could he believe that her cause was truly just? There was still so much about her and her motivations that Dylan didn't understand. It was hard to know whether he was making the right choice, or if he was simply being swept along by her charisma and promises of power. As he wandered the halls of the ship, he found himself thinking about Earth again. He thought about the peaceful days, the simple life. He thought about the people he loved, his friends, his family. Everything he had known was so far away now. The memories seemed like they belonged to another lifetime, a life he could never return to. He had left everything behind when he boarded that ill-fated mission. Was there any chance he could go back? Would Earth even accept him now? Thera's words echoed in his mind. "I will help you rebuild a future," she had said. But was he really willing to let go of everything he had fought for back home, just to take a chance on her vision? Dylan's emotions were a whirlwind. Part of him wanted to join her cause, to be a part of something bigger than himself. But another part of him was terrified of losing himself, of becoming something he wasn't. Could he live with the consequences of his choices? If he joined Thera, would he ever be the same again? That night, as the stars drifted by outside his window, he was visited once more. This time, it wasn't Thera who came to him. It was another figure, someone he hadn't expected. It was Terran, one of the other soldiers he had met after his arrival. Terran had always been a bit of a mystery. He was strong, capable, and had been through the same harsh training and missions as Dylan. But there was something different about him. Terran wasn't interested in the politics of the war, in the power struggles. He was just a soldier, one who wanted to survive. "Dylan," Terran's voice was low, almost a whisper. "I know what you're going through." Dylan looked up at him, startled. "You do?" Terran nodded, his expression unreadable. "I've been in your shoes. When I first got here, I was given a choice too. A chance to join forces with the Empire. A chance for power, for security. They promised me everything I ever wanted. But in the end, I realized something. Power isn't everything. Not if you lose yourself in the process." Dylan stood up slowly, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" Terran met his gaze, his eyes dark with experience. "You have to ask yourself what you really want. Do you want to be a part of a cause that's bigger than yourself, even if it means losing everything you stand for? Or do you want to fight for something that matters, something real? You've seen the truth about the Empire. You've seen the cruelty, the lies. Don't let them win." The words hit Dylan harder than he expected. He had been so focused on Thera, on her promises, that he hadn't really stopped to think about what mattered to him. He had been so caught up in the idea of change, of being a part of something great, that he had forgotten why he fought in the first place. It wasn't for power. It wasn't for glory. It was for the people, for the innocent lives that were being crushed under the weight of this war. Terran's voice broke through his thoughts. "You're not alone in this. There are others who want to see things change too. But we have to be careful. If you trust the wrong person, if you join the wrong side, you could lose everything." Dylan nodded slowly, absorbing Terran's words. It wasn't about the grand promises. It was about what was right, what was worth fighting for. The next day, Thera came to him again. She stood before him, as confident and powerful as ever. But this time, Dylan didn't feel the same pull he had before. He was no longer swayed by her promises. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice steady. Thera raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. "I'm not joining you," Dylan said, his decision clear. "I can't be part of a cause that I don't fully believe in. I'm not going to fight for power. I'm going to fight for something that matters. For the people who are suffering. For a future where we can be free from this empire's control." For the first time since he had met her, Thera's expression softened. She didn't look angry or betrayed. Instead, she looked resigned. "I knew it would come to this," she said quietly. "But know this, Dylan, this war is far from over. The choice you've made will have consequences." Dylan didn't back down. "I'm ready to face those consequences." And with that, he walked away, knowing that the road ahead would be dangerous. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was making the right choice. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for something real, something worth protecting. The ultimate choice had been made, and Dylan was ready to face whatever came next. Dylan's decision to walk away from Thera and the Empire was a moment of clarity in the chaos. But as he stood on the deck of the ship, staring out into the vast expanse of space, he knew that this was only the beginning. The consequences of his choice were still unknown, and the path ahead was uncertain. He had made an enemy of Thera, and she was not the type to forget a slight. But he had also made a promise to himself, a promise to fight for something real, something that mattered. The weeks that followed were full of tension. Word of his defection spread through the ranks of the Empire like wildfire. Some saw him as a traitor, others as a hero. But for Dylan, it didn't matter what anyone else thought. What mattered was that he had chosen his own path. He had chosen to fight for the innocent, for those who had no voice in this war, and he was determined to see that fight through, no matter the cost. As he settled into his new role, Dylan began to make allies among those who, like him, had grown disillusioned with the Empire's cruelty. It wasn't easy. Trust had to be earned, and every step forward felt like a battle. But little by little, Dylan started to see the shift. The spark of resistance was growing. It was small at first, just whispers of rebellion among the ranks, but it was enough to fuel his hope. He wasn't alone in this fight. There were others who believed in a future where the galaxy could be free from the Empire's control. It wasn't long before Dylan crossed paths with a group of former soldiers who had defected, much like him. They were a ragtag team of rebels, each with their own reasons for fighting. Some had lost family to the Empire's oppression, while others had seen firsthand the horrors it was capable of. Together, they formed a loose coalition, bound by a shared desire to overthrow the Empire. Dylan joined them, becoming one of their leaders. Training was grueling, and the risks were high. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But through it all, Dylan remained focused on his goal. He knew that this was what he had been fighting for all along. This was the real war. It wasn't about power or glory. It was about freedom, about giving people a chance at a better life. And Dylan was willing to do whatever it took to see that happen. There were victories along the way, small but significant. They hit key targets, disrupted supply lines, and liberated entire sectors from the Empire's grasp. Each victory brought them closer to their goal, but it also drew the Empire's attention. Thera, in particular, was relentless in her pursuit of Dylan and his new allies. She sent wave after wave of soldiers to hunt them down, and each time they barely escaped. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but it was the only game worth playing. The more Dylan fought alongside his new comrades, the more he realized how much he had changed. He was no longer the soldier who had blindly followed orders. He was a leader now, a symbol of hope for those who had nothing left to lose. And in the process, he had gained something unexpected, his own sense of purpose. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger than himself. Through it all, Dylan couldn't help but think about Thera. He had made his choice, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the determination that made her a force to be reckoned with. There was no denying her strength, but he also knew that the Empire she represented was not the future he wanted. He would not back down, no matter how powerful she became. The fight for freedom had only just begun. As the days turned into months, the resistance grew stronger. More and more people joined their cause, drawn by the promise of a better future. And with each new recruit, Dylan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail them. He had to lead them to victory, not just for himself, but for all those who had suffered under the Empire's rule. The final showdown was inevitable. Dylan knew it was coming. Thera would stop at nothing to crush the rebellion, to reassert her control over the galaxy. But he wasn't afraid. He had faced death before. He had survived battles that should have killed him. And now, with the resistance behind him, he felt more powerful than ever. This was the moment that would define him, the moment that would decide the future of the galaxy. The day of the battle arrived. The sky above was dark with the shadow of enemy ships, and the ground below trembled with the force of approaching war machines. Dylan stood at the front of his army, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the culmination of everything he had worked for. The Empire would fall, or he would die trying. The battle was fierce, unlike anything Dylan had ever experienced. Laser blasts lit up the sky, and explosions rocked the earth. The clash of soldiers was deafening, the air thick with the sounds of war. But through it all, Dylan fought with a purpose. He fought for every person who had been oppressed, for every life that had been ruined by the Empire's cruelty. And slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. As the dust settled, and the last of the Empire's forces were defeated, Dylan looked around at the faces of his comrades, faces filled with relief, with hope. They had done it. The rebellion had won. The Empire was no more. But it wasn't over yet. There was still work to be done. The galaxy was free, but it was broken. It would take time to rebuild, to heal the wounds of war. Dylan stood tall, his heart full of pride. He had made the right choice. He had fought for something real, something worth believing in. And now, as the galaxy began its long journey toward peace, he knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with hope, with possibility, and with a future worth fighting for. The battle was over. The war had been won. And Dylan was ready for whatever came next. Captain Dylan Hawk had been on many missions in his life, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened when his ship was ambushed. Deep in alien space, he had been tasked with gathering intel on an unknown enemy force. Everything had seemed routine at first. His ship, the Valkyrie, was cruising through the dense asteroid field when a massive, cloaked alien fleet appeared out of nowhere. The ships were unlike anything he had ever seen before, sleek, dark, and glowing with a faint, eerie light. His crew fought back with all their might, but it was no use. They were outgunned, outclassed, and completely overwhelmed. One by one, the ship's systems failed, and eventually the engine shut down. Dylan tried to initiate an escape sequence, but before he could even think about getting to the escape pods, the hull of the Valkyrie was breached. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and he heard the unmistakable sound of boots stomping across the metal floor. It was then that he realized they had boarded. A rush of panic surged through him, but he fought it down. He had been trained for moments like this. His training told him to act fast, stay calm, and fight. But as he ran through the corridors, trying to find a way to escape, a sudden wave of energy knocked him off his feet. He was captured, taken aboard an alien ship where his fate was about to take a drastic turn. The ship he was brought onto was massive, a sleek, dark behemoth floating silently through space. He was thrown into a holding cell, a high-tech prison with walls that seemed to pulse with energy. He could hear the faint hum of advanced technology all around him, the presence of something far beyond human comprehension. Dylan tried to break free, but the force field around the cell was impenetrable. Every move he made was met with resistance, as if the very walls of the cell were designed to trap him. For hours he was alone, left to contemplate his situation. His mind raced with possibilities. Escape, rebellion, maybe even negotiation. But nothing came to him. Just as he started to lose hope, the door to his cell opened with a sharp hiss, and a tall, imposing figure stepped inside. She was unlike anything Dylan had ever seen. Standing well over 6 feet tall, her alien features were sharp and regal. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, and her eyes glowed with an unsettling, almost predatory intensity. She wore armor that shimmered with strange symbols, and her presence alone radiated power. This was no ordinary alien. This was General Thera, the commander of this fleet. She didn't speak immediately, instead studying him with a gaze that seemed to cut through him. Dylan stood, his fists clenched at his sides, ready for whatever came next. He knew better than to show fear, but his body betrayed him as his heart raced. He had faced countless enemies in his career, but this alien commander, she felt different. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and commanding. "You are the human soldier, Captain Dylan Hawk," she said, as if confirming a fact rather than asking a question. "You have been captured by my fleet. You are now in my custody." Dylan didn't say anything, his thoughts racing. He had no idea who this alien was, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. He took a step forward, sizing her up, trying to gauge what she wanted. She didn't seem like one to speak much, but he wasn't going to be intimidated. Farah tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I've heard stories of your kind," she continued. "Humans, so resilient, so stubborn, so unlike any other species we've encountered. You may have been defeated, but I admire that. It makes you interesting." Dylan's mind was working overtime. The stories she mentioned, the rumors of humanity's unbreakable spirit, they had reached the ears of many in the galaxy. But this alien, this commander, wasn't like the others. He could see it in her eyes. There was something else at play here, something bigger than just a conquest. Without warning, Thera stepped closer to him, and for the first time, Dylan felt the weight of her presence. She was not just a commander. She was a leader, a force to be reckoned with, and she was studying him like a subject for a new experiment.